I suppose, the place I really wanted to start at was, what, perhaps a lot of people might have already seen, which was, Donald Trump's speech last night at the CPAC conference, where he not only reiterated the false claims that the election had been rigged, but also that the movement that he'd started 4 years ago was one that was only just beginning, and that perhaps he might even be running for presidency in 2024. And really here, I really agree with Rab Nawaz when he says that, kicking out Trump is only small progress, really, because I think, what the events in the last few months have shown, from the Capitol Hill riots to the position of Trump and the forces around him, is that Trump might be out of office, but Trumpism and the politics that Donald Trump represents internationally has not at all gone away. And I think we can see that here in the UK as well, as the speakers before me have highlighted. I mean, you think about the fact that Priti Patel and the Tories have really gone on the offensive against Black Lives Matter, the Take the Knee movement, and, the climate movement, really, as Gus before me had drawn out. And, for people like Priti Patel, who sees the protests and the Take the Knee events over the summer, something that was dreadful, she really actually wants to maintain a level of restrictions on protests and our ability to speak out and organise on the streets. She wants to maintain a level of the restrictions on that once the lockdown begins to ease around COVID as well. And this is paired with the attacks from Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, who wants to introduce a number of measures to defend free speech. This is, when he talks about free speech, he's talking about the right of people to say racist, bigoted things on campuses and so on, and also protect academics, supposedly, from the pressure and censorship when it comes to what they're putting on their syllabuses. In other words, an attack on the decolonise movement on campuses and so on. And in that regard, I think, considering the attacks on, anti-racist work and decolonise work on campuses and in education, I think it's really, really important that we have Sabina here from COPS Off Campus talking about the importance of anti-racism in the universities and so on. But nonetheless, I think, not only has the urgency of fighting racism and the far right been something that hasn't gone away at all, but instead exacerbated by the pandemic. I think, the attempt to undermine the resistance to both of those things means that we actually have to fight harder and organise more in order to combat this, really. And, you think about the solution from the Tories to the crisis, not just around COVID-19, but also the economic crisis, ignoring scientific evidence at the expense of the majority and blaming migrants, refugees and minorities in the process, whenever you see the negative impact of that. All of these things, I think, make incredibly important, making sure we have a solution to it all. And I think, while we see all of that, at the same time, we also see, the hope through Black Lives Matter as well, something that actually mobilised millions of people around the world and hundreds of thousands across the UK as well, and was a movement that actually transformed the terrain when it comes to challenging racism. And like somebody said before me, Black Lives Matter has absolutely produced a whole new layer of activists and leaders. And I think UN Anti-Racism Day on the 20th of March is an important opportunity to combine those layers, to combine that new layer of activists and leaders with the power of our community groups, the unions that are a very crucial part of the United Front. That's why I think it was brilliant to see 1,000 trade unionists engage in workshops and plenaries on, fighting for anti-racist workplaces. And, later, students and young activists, coming together for a forum for how young people can shape the plans around the 20th of March. And I think all of this is important because, as I've mentioned, the urgency around fighting racism hasn't gone away at all. Sorry, I'm being told to wrap up, so I'm going to sort of bring it to a close here. Obviously, the urgency around fighting racism hasn't gone away at all, and I think what we want to do is, with the 20th of March, make sure that if anything, that's the beginning of a process where we make sure that things don't go back to the way they were before once this pandemic is over, whenever that is, and make sure actually Black Lives Matter isn't something that was just a moment, but something that delivers lasting change. So I'll leave it at that, and my apologies to the chair.